Libby kind of stole my thunder there. I am David Mitchell, and prescription drugs are keeping me alive, literally. A week from today, I'll be doing this for 5 hours. I'll be getting infusion with about half a dozen drugs, 2 of which, main events, anti-cancer drugs, cost at retail $20,000 every time they give them to me. And they'll give them to me 22 times over the course of this treatment year, which means that standing before you is $450,000 or so worth of drugs that are maintaining my life. I am very grateful for these drugs. I'm very grateful to the science and research community in our country for inventing these drugs. Even more importantly, I need them to invent new ones because the disease I have is incurable because my disease finds its way around drugs. It mutates. And so if they don't invent new drugs, I won't live as long as I hope to. I got a 15-year-old son. I'd like to see him graduate from college. I'd love to have a grandchild one day. But I may not make it if they don't invent new drugs. And so I'm a patient completely dependent on innovation and R&D. For me, it's not theoretical, it's life and death. But there's a fundamental truth, and we're all talking about it up here. I'm going to talk about it specifically in relationship to prescription drugs. They don't work if people can't afford them. And today we're talking about how to close the gap, and I'm going to talk some about the work that we are doing to, in fact, close that gap. But it is my experience as a cancer patient that brought me face to face with this fact. So my wife and I, a little more than a year ago, she's also a cancer survivor. She's taking tamoxifen right now for 5 years, decided that we would establish Patients for Affordable Drugs. We are the only national patient organization focused exclusively on policies to lower prescription drug prices. And in order to maintain our independence, we don't take money from anybody who profits from the development and distribution of prescription drugs. So we can speak without fear or favor. We do, and I will today, in spite of the fact that there are some folks in the room who probably don't agree at all with what I'm about to say. In the 7 or so months that we've been in existence, we launched in February, we've collected 8,500 patient stories. We've collected almost 18,000 email addresses. The stories we've collected are stories of people who are cutting their pills in half. They're skipping doses. They're trying to manage type 1 diabetes with diet and exercise and waiting till their blood sugar spikes before they take their insulin, which is not a good strategy if you're a diabetic to maintain your health. I want to show you one story. Oops. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to ask you to roll a video. I'll show you one story that's on our website that kind of captures what it is we're trying to do.
My son Eli is 4 years old, and he has cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic and terminal lung illness. When he was 1 year old, his lung doctor and his pediatrician recommended that he receive a medicine called Synagis, an AstraZeneca drug. This is a preventive medicine that's meant to protect against a severe type of cold called RSV, which can kill premature babies, and it can also severely hurt or kill a child with a chronic illness. The pediatrician asked my insurance company to pay for this drug, which costs more than $1,000 a dose. The doses are administered as one shot per month over 5 months. Our insurer cited a 1960s hand washing study in its denial of this drug to my son. We feel these costs very acutely. Everything from drug costs to hospitalizations to child care. It makes it hard to afford this drug. There's no money for it because we've been paying for all of these other things. When he was 3 years old, he was hospitalized for 5 days. I had to see my son in the hospital suffering. He was scared. He was in pain. That was the year that I decided that I was never going to give up so easily again, and I decided to fight.
So the stories we've collected, they don't know any gender, and they don't know any ethnicity, they don't know any region, they don't know any political affiliation. People are angry and they are scared, and they don't understand how this could be happening to them in the United States of America, and they want something done about it. So that's what we're going to try and do. It's what we're trying to do already. Our work is to amplify patient voices to policymakers and elected officials, and to educate, activate, and mobilize patients about what we can do collectively to lower prescription drug prices. What are the solutions that we focus on? Well, we believe that Medicare should have the ability to negotiate directly over prescription drug prices. We believe that we have to have transparency on the part of pharmacy benefit managers, the idea that they are an expression of our public policy because Medicare can't bargain directly, and that they supposedly bargain on our behalf, but we can't see inside them, is outrageous. We don't know when they negotiate their discounts off of list price, or the rebate price, how much they put in their pocket, how much goes to the insurer. We don't know if any of it reaches the patients. So we want PBM transparency across the whole healthcare system. And in fact, over time, we imagine it would be possible, this is a bridge too far, to just disintermediate them altogether. We'd like to speed generics to market by stopping patent abuses, and I'll talk about a couple of examples of those in the next couple of minutes. We think that when a drug is invented using taxpayer money, and the fact is 50 to 60% of the new drugs that come to market are developed using taxpayer funding, that there is a special obligation on the part of the drug company to justify the price of that drug, and that a starting point for discussion about pricing or negotiation under Medicare should be something more like the value to patients, not the monopoly pricing power of drug companies, which are granted periods of exclusivity ranging from 5 to 12 years. Our theory of change is pretty simple. It is that reform is more likely with an independent patient voice than without one. Why? Well, the New England Journal of Medicine published a piece earlier this year showing that 83% of patient organizations that have funding in excess of $7.5 million receive funding from the pharmaceutical industry. Now, they put the money to good use. They use it for patient education, patient support. I called those hotlines. When I was first diagnosed, I was very sick. I was sick from the cancer. I did have spine surgery, a balloon kyphoplasty, because I had a compression fracture of my T11 vertebra. I was very sick from the cancer, and I was very sick from the drugs. And I called those hotlines, and I talked to the health nurses. I want those resources there for patients. But if patient groups cannot jeopardize their funding for patient service in order to fight drug prices, then we will do that for them. What have we been doing? Well, we were active in Maryland on the price gouging bill that was enacted there. We were active in Nevada, where a bill requiring transparency on insulin pricing was enacted, signed into law by a Republican governor, enacted with bipartisan support over incredible opposition from the drug companies. And we are active in California, that a bill is sitting on the governor's desk. Right now we're running ads in California urging people to send messages to the governor. We send them to a place where they can send a message to the governor urging him to sign the bill. It's a transparency and price notification bill. If prices go up more than 16% in a 2-year period, there has to be notification. We believe the governor will sign that bill. We testified in Congress so far this year. We testified before the FDA on the issue of drug companies refusing to provide samples to generic manufacturers, claiming that the drugs are dangerous. And they are dangerous. They're approved by the FDA with something called a risk evaluation mitigation strategy, but the drug companies hide behind the risk evaluation and mitigation strategy and say we can't possibly give those drugs to those generic manufacturers because someone might be hurt by them. But that's BS, because they're more than willing to provide samples of those drugs to the drug companies who want to run clinical trials using their drug in combination with others. And if there's any cancer doctors in the room, they know that almost every cancer is treated now, certainly blood cancers, with combination treatments. I want to talk about one drug in particular, and I want to say how sorry I am about your daughter. This drug is the one that would have saved his daughter's life. It's called Kymriah. It was approved on August 29th by the FDA. Novartis brought it to market. The drug is amazing. It could cure me, maybe. We do not have longitudinal data yet on whether or not it's a cure. We can't see out that far. But if they give it to me and it gives me 10 years, I'll take it, but not at $475,000. And that's where it was priced. But let's start here on why that's wrong. U.S. taxpayers invested more than $200 million since 1993 to develop CAR-T research. And on August 29th, the day it was approved by the FDA, Francis Collins said Kymriah, quote, is grounded on initial basic research supported by the NIH. So we paid to develop this drug. We paid when the risk was the greatest. And it was only after a paper was published in August 2011, funded in part by the NIH, that Novartis moved because the paper showed that it was viable, that it worked, and the risk went down. Novartis moved, made a deal with UPenn where it was developed, and gave them $20 million to build the UPenn Novartis CAR-T Center, and then they paid some undisclosed amount for the global worldwide rights in perpetuity to all CARs developed at UPenn. So we paid to bring this drug to market. Novartis is commercializing it, and I'm glad they are. What do we think? Why do we think Novartis is priced too high? Well, the doctor at UPenn who published that seminal paper, Dr. June, who spent years developing this, in 2012 made a speech, you can watch it with your own two eyes on YouTube, saying the price of goods for this drug should be $20,000, said that Novartis didn't have to figure out how to make it, only how to make a lot of it, and that the price would go down as they scaled. In 2015, the CFO of Kite, which was just purchased by Gilead, the people who brought us Sovaldi for $1,000 a pill for Hep C, they bought Kite for $12 billion, so they expect to make a lot of money on this drug. The Kite CFO in 2015 said the price of the whole treatment should be $150,000. The Novartis CEO claimed when pushed that they had spent $1 billion he said, we've invested $1 billion to develop this drug, to bring it to market. But Novartis is receiving a 50% tax credit under the Orphan Drug Act for the clinical trials, defraying its $1 billion investment. And about 3 weeks ago, the FDA gave Novartis something called a priority review voucher that the FDA puts a value on of $225 million. May be worth more if Novartis holds it and uses it for a blockbuster that will speed to market faster. It could be worth $500 million or $1 billion, but just say 225. And with the with the ODA tax credits and the orphan review credit, that billion becomes a whole hell of a lot less. And as I say, they're standing on a foundation that taxpayers paid for already. And the study that you cited, Doctor, from NICE, that was a theoretical study done by the University of York, did not say that the drug was worth $650,000. It said that maybe we could start talking about a price at $460,000. Maybe that would be a good starting point for negotiation. What do we think Kymriah should cost? Well, this is a difficult thing to know because the only people who know the real numbers is Novartis. But we think that Kymriah, based on all the data points I've laid out to you and modeling we've done, that Kymriah is priced at least $125,000 to $150,000 too high. And by the way, the $475,000 price for a family is not the price. It's going to be marked up because it's a Part B drug or it's an infusion drug, so it'll be marked up whether it's delivered under Medicare or Medicaid or whatever program. And the costs of care associated with administering this drug and caring for the patient, probably north of $250,000. So we're probably talking about a drug that we're asking families. There are 620 kids who are eligible for this drug with the initial approval by the FDA. We're asking these families to pay $750,000. And you know what they're talking about doing? They're coming up with pricing or payment formulas where we're going to take out mortgages effectively to buy the drug. And so the question that gets asked by the drug companies, and it's so wrong, is, well, how much are you willing to pay for it? If it saves this much on health care, if it saves the life of your child, how much? Well, if it's my kid on the stretcher, I'm willing to pay whatever it takes. I'll mortgage my house, I'll empty my 401k, I'll do whatever it takes. But that's the wrong question. The right question is, what is the appropriate amount for that drug company to make on that drug that we helped develop that will save that child's life? We've got it backwards. We've got it precisely upside down. What do we want? We want fair and transparent pricing in light of taxpayer investment for this drug. U.S. patients should pay no more than patients in other wealthy countries, and we pay roughly 2 or 3 times the cost of drugs in other wealthy countries. And we want to see the price go down as patient population increases. What are we going to do from here? We're working to educate patients and policymakers. We're continuing to work for the importance of taxpayer funding and recognizing it. We're continuing to urge restraint from Novartis, and we're reaching out to Gilead and Juno, another company coming behind with CAR-T, to ask them to show restraint in pricing. And this is critical because this is a whole new class of drugs. This is going to affect lots of blood cancers, and then hopefully they'll figure out a way to have it penetrate solid tumors. And if we keep having drugs approved at $500,000 with the total cost of care in the range of $750,000 to $1 million, not only will patients not be able to afford it, but our system will buckle under the weight of it. Now, just one more small outrage. You may have read a couple of weeks ago that Allergan transferred a patent to a Mohawk sovereign Indian tribe in upstate New York, because by doing that, it was immune from a patent challenge under a part of our patent law. This drug, the active ingredient, came off patent in 2014. There's still no generic for it. We are getting letters from patients saying they have foregone food to pay for this drug. It's an eye drop. So in order to further its patent protection, Allergan made this sham move to transfer it so that it can't be challenged as easily, and they're trying to extend the patent to 2024. Today, Senator Maggie Hassan, Senators Blumenthal, Casey, Brown sent a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee asking for an investigation of this tactic. And this afternoon, we heard from Congressman Gowdy's office in the House, who wants to know more about what we're hearing from patients about this issue. We hope that Congress moves quickly to address this kind of abuse, this kind of outrage that allows companies. They were laughing about this. It was brilliant. It was novel in news reports. Companies to take advantage of our patent system and do it on the backs of patients who can't afford these drugs. And, you know, 5 years of exclusivity for a small molecule drug, 7 years for an orphan drug, 12 years for a biologic, and it's not enough? So we have to fix this. So where are we going to go from here in general? Well, we're going to continue to work to try and close the gap on the gap that exists between what people can afford and what they're being asked to pay. And we fundamentally believe that the right framework is that prescription drugs should be priced at a level to maximize accessibility and affordability, while providing drug companies who commercialize drugs, mostly that's what they do, a reasonable return on R&D, or for R&D, and 27% or whatever profit makes them happy, some profit. And so we will continue to work to build our community of patients and allies. We're advocating in Congress right now for a bill that would stop these abuses where the drug companies won't give samples so that a bioequivalent could be developed by a generic company. We're working and planning already for state legislative activity in 2018. And we'll be working next year with about 3 times the budget we had this year. And so we hope to continue to have some impact. And it is an uphill fight. We're not Pollyannas. I'll leave you with a story from my wife. When we had a family meeting last summer to talk about doing this, explained to the kids that I was going to retire, work for free, that we were going to invest some of our own money. My wife stood up at the end of the conversation and said, "So this is your father's idea of retirement?" work for free, spend his own money, and take on an industry that hasn't lost a fight in 40 years. But you know what? It's worth the fight. Thank you.